So the childcare financial assistance overview, when you hear childcare financial assistance, what do you think about? Someone can put something in the chat, or can I get a brave soul to come off of you? When you think of childcare financial assistance, what do you think about?
Vouchers and subsidized slots.
Vouchers and subsidized slots. What else?
It's basically providing families assistance with payments for childcare that unfortunately they can't afford on their own.
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for those who are adding in the chat. What I'm going to talk about is where does childcare financial assistance start, right? What is the background of childcare financial assistance? So childcare financial assistance comes from what we call CCDF, or the Child Care and Development Fund, right? It's a federal and state partnership that actually authorizes a federal block grant that provides funds, right? Childcare financial assistance to different states, right? The federal fund actually has regulations and rules that drive the work that we do in states to administer childcare financial assistance. Federally, the federal policy set what we do here as states on a very high level. So federally, there are four requirements: citizenship, that the child must be under the age of 13 or up to 16 if there's a disability. The family's income, it does not exceed 85% of the state median income for Massachusetts, and assets can't be over $1 million. And then that the parents or the guardians have to have what many of you would call a service need. But with federally, they just say they have to be engaging in work or attending education or work training program. Federally, that's what they set, right? Federal rules set the very high level for eligibility. And then what the federal government does is they say, states, you have the ability to exercise certain flexibilities as you're administering the childcare financial assistance. What you should know too is that the federal grant, right, this federal block grant, the CCDBG, they also provide other funds for us to be able to invest in quality initiatives around early education and care and supporting programs. And so childcare financial assistance is part of what's funded through this block grant, but there are other things within our agency that they also fund. And so the constructs of childcare financial assistance are very simple. So CCDBG, that's our federal statute, right? They establish the baseline eligibility. We just talked about that baseline is citizenship, income, age of child, and that there's this service need, right? And then the role of EEC, right? Our role is to really determine the policies and the processes, define the terms, and decide how we're going to do it all, right? How we're going to do it all. And so that's what we've done. We've revised our regulations, we've updated our policies, and we're updating our procedures to change some of the things that we've been doing for families and administering childcare financial assistance in a more flexible way, which is something that the federal government is encouraging all states to do as they're administering childcare financial assistance. So there are 3 appropriations. So state appropriations are the simplest way to say it is like funding sources, right? They're the funding sources. In Massachusetts, we have 3 funding sources that primarily fund childcare financial assistance federally. So that's income eligible, and that's DTA and DCF. So we say we have 3 programs, right? Those funding sources or appropriations are how we actually fund childcare financial assistance, and we ensure that there's spending available for that fund. And then Massachusetts every state has to have its own statutes, right? And so our statutes around childcare financial assistance are Chapter 15D. And these are our responsibilities, what we have said as the state of Massachusetts, what we have set as our responsibilities around the administering of childcare financial assistance. And then the role of EEC here is that we administer childcare financial assistance, wait lists, and our rate structures. So if you have time, you know, or you're a geek like me and you might like policies and procedures and regs, you can Google and you can look up what are the appropriations that are connected to childcare financial assistance. And you'll see there are appropriations for the wait list, there's appropriations for our rate structures, and there's appropriations for our income eligible program, as well as our DTA and DCF programs. And so childcare financial assistance programs, we like to break them up into three, right? And this is intentional to align with our state appropriations, right? And so you have income eligible, you have DTA, and you have DCF. Can anyone guess what the biggest difference is in the programs? You can come off of mute and you can use your chat. Can anyone guess? Can anyone make a guess of what the difference is between income eligible, DTA, and DCF?
Policies and procedures.
Yes, yes, that's true.
The DCF and DTA require a referral. I know
Yeah,
it's like referral based.
very close. Yep.
DTA and DTF are entitlement programs.
Say that again. Who was that?
Where the funding
Hey,
comes from?
They're
Yeah.
entitlement programs.
They are entitlement programs. Yes. Tell me more. What does that mean for those who don't know what an entitlement means?
Oh goodness, I'm probably not going to explain it well. Well, I mean, basically what the word is, they're entitled to certain services, and you know, they don't need to show other they don't need to show other like service needs except for what DCF or DTA puts on the referral.
Somewhat, Haley. It's even before that. So on the previous slide, I talked about appropriations, right? And so DTA and DCF are an entitlement appropriation, which means that they're entitled to those services, right? Because they're entitled to childcare because they're working with DCF or they're working with DTA. That means for those of you who may have been around for a long time, I know there have been times where funding has been closed, right, on the wait list. Our families through DTA and DCF, because they're in an entitlement, they don't have to go on the wait list and they're not required to wait, right? Because as recipients of the DTA or DCF services, they're entitled for that childcare support. So thank you, Haley. Thank you, Haley, and everyone else. So there are our three programs, and one of the biggest differences is that income eligible families, they have to come in through a wait list, and DTA and DCF families, they come in through a referral. So there's a difference in their access point, right? One is accessing through a wait list where there's somewhat of a wait. And then on the DTA, DCF side, they're getting an immediate expedited enrollment. Now you'll see there are two other groups that are included in income eligible, and that's our homeless and our young parents. What I'd like to say about our homeless and our young parents, though they are coming in through income eligible, those families, we consider those families as a priority family. So some of those families also have the ability to have an expedited enrollment. And we'll talk more about that later. There are two forms of childcare finance. There's two forms of assistance, and that's our vouchers and that's our contracts. Somebody tell me what's the difference between vouchers and contracts? Other than what you see on the screen in front of you. What's the biggest difference between a voucher and a contract? Sorry.
Contracts have
Payment.
allotted slots.
The parent
Contract.
choice.
Parent choice?
Yeah. So
almost.
the parent gets to choose the slot rather than like this, they get to pick where the kid goes. Does that make sense?
For the voucher? Yeah.
For the voucher, whereas contract slot, like the the program is choosing them.
You
And-
got it, right? Or they're choosing the program, right? But the biggest difference between a contract and a voucher is mobile, right? A family, the voucher goes with the family. A contracted slot is for that entity. I think I see a hand. Do I see a hand, Eugenia? Someone have their hand up?
I did, but that's what I was gonna say, that it's the contracted slot is not mobile.
Yeah, the contract slot's not mobile. So as you'll see on your screen, a voucher may be used at any program that accepts childcare financial assistance, right? And vouchers are administered only by our childcare resource and referral agencies, right? Our contracted slots are for that specific entity. And for some, it could be a specific entity or it could be a family childcare system that may have multiple different locations. And for some of our contracted providers, they also have multiple locations, but it is for that specific contracted provider. So thank you. And one of the other differences between a contract and a voucher, for our contracted slots that are working with our DCF families, where they have like a specific DCF supportive contract, they're eligible for DCF and homeless, and our young parents, they're eligible for an additional add-on rate for supportive services for their families, which is a difference between our vouchers. And I'm going to turn it over to Bethany to talk about what, on a high level, what the family journey looks like for the two different tracks, whether you're DTA, DCF, or income eligible.
Thanks, Tyrese.
Bethany?
Yes, so as Tyrese said, this is going to be just a high-level overview of the family's journey. And as I'm talking about this, I want you to think, if you've had a child in the system, what your journey was. It's very similar. And these are really those high-level touch points of when a family is moving through the system. So for income eligible, that's going to start with the family determining for themselves their own need for child's care. That might be the birth of a baby, that might be their child's needing some additional developmental or socialization activities, and they determine that need, and then they reach out. They reach out, they hopefully we're guiding them now, as we're being more public facing, to our resources, which are you in the community, our CCRNRs.
Also, your B sets for only.
Your contracted providers. And I'm just going to remind folks to mute. I think we're getting a little bit of background noise, but they come to you and they identify as needing child's care, and then you support them in identifying if they have any statuses and just how to prioritize them, and they join our wait list, and you do that through joining the wait list. So the family is on our wait list until they get a funding availability notice, and that will come from the CCRNR, the contracted provider, and that will let them know what they need now to be determined eligible. We're going to talk about the things that happen on each one of these points in more detail, but in essence, eligibility, sort of them becoming known that there's a funding available for them, starts, and that eligibility is really determined. And that's where the family will find the child's care within your program or within the community. You verify their eligibility, meeting with them, verifying documentation, and so forth. And if the family is determined eligible, they will receive a voucher or a contract within your program, and the child can enroll with the family, the parent fee being determined. At that point, the family is on their journey in our system, being reauthorized every 12 months until they either graduate income-wise from the program or children age out, etc. And this is really, again, for income eligible. So for DCF and DTA, our entitlement programs, this parent journey looks a little different to the families and to you as our family access administrators. The family is determining their need for childcare. And sometimes, depending on the program, that might be in conjunction with a worker as they're working with their case with DCF or DTA. DTA or DCF sends a referral for DTA that goes directly to the CCRNRs. The parents don't need to present a paper referral to you. They're not filling out that application. And then for DCF, that looks like a referral to the CCRNRs directly from the area office child care coordinator or from the other, or from for contracted providers that will be for directly to your program for one of your contracted slots. I'm just going to ask my team if you could just make sure everybody's on mute, just check out that list for me. That would be great. And then at that point, the family is either through the CCRNR finding their child's care in the community or through the contracted provider, you're navigating them through your different program options and they're visiting with programs, etc. So the families fill out the required documentation that is part of that program, which we'll go over again.
Bethany, you're
So,
on mute.
yep.
There you go.
So thank you. And so with that, after they fill out their required documentation, they're going to get a voucher, a slot within your programs. And then the family is on their journey again, being reauthorized every 12 months repeatedly. One thing I'll just highlight before we leave this slide is that we know that many families that are with DCF or DTA may also be experiencing homelessness or be young parents. And with together working with the family, if a family determines that they want to go on the income eligible route, they can do that, but also they could go through this DCF and DTA route, which might eliminate some of the paperwork that is required. So Tyrese, we can move on from this one. Thank you.
So now we're gonna shift a little bit, right? We started with our overview of, and my slides are jumping, sorry. We started with our overview of what childcare financial assistance is. Like, what are the constructs? What does the federal rules say? What do states have the ability to do? And now we're gonna talk about the family, right? What are the steps in a family's journey? Right. What is a steps in the family's journey? So I'm asking that question to the audience. Tell me, what are the steps in the family's journey? Anyone? I can't see the chat right now.
I'll speak.
And checking out
Andre?
resources. Yep. And you're getting some things in the chat that just started coming up. Pre-screening, checking out resources, contacting an agency for help.
Yeah. What else? What else? Calling 211.
I'll speak. Getting on the wait list first if they're looking for voucher assistance. And then waiting to receive their funding availability letter and then pre-screening.
Yeah. What happens before that?
Asking for help.
Visits.
Asking for help. What happens? Yep. Asking for help. What else, Amy? What else? Somebody else. What else? Amy, you can't. What do you mean by
calling their local resource and referral agency to find out what is available for assistance, what roads that they can take to get financial assistance for childcare.
Yeah.
How about finding a provider?
Yeah. What happens before then, though?
Amanda says building a relationship with the family.
Yes. OMG. Yes. Amanda, the parent needs to, Jessica, the parent needs to determine they have a need. We have parents come to us directly and inquire to ask for help. Yes, it is all those things. Before we get to the process, there are the people. There are the people. You're going to hear me talk a lot today about people first before the process, right? We know what our process is, but the family journey really begins with getting to know who the family is, right? Understanding the family, Who is the family? What do they need? And then like, how can you help them, right? How can you help them? And so that's, yes, determine the need, determine the need, determine the need. But you can't determine the need unless you know the people first, right? And so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second because I want to be able to see people and for us to have a discussion about what that actually means. So when you're getting to know who is the family, what does that look like? And take the process of childcare financial assistance away from it first, right? There was someone in the chat who said, oh my goodness, we have parents come to us directly to inquire and ask for help. Like, what does it mean? How do you get to know who is the family? I wanna hear from you. Chat is good, but I wanna hear some voices as well.
I think having a relationship with your families and noticing that there may be a need,
Yeah,
and sometimes you just have to approach them in the correct manner.
yeah. But before that, right, Karen, there's things that happen, right? For our intake specialists who are on, right? You're the first point of contact for some of the families. How much do they tell you about themselves? I see, Margaret, you're shaking your head, right? Tell me, somebody, how much do you learn from that parent in that first conversation with just the phone call before they even know what they want?
So, well, when they first call in, parents, when they first call in, sometimes they will tell you a lot. Sometimes they'll tell you very little. It depends on the parent. So usually when they call in to me, I'll say to them, I need to ask you some questions. First, you have a few moments because I'm going to need to talk to you to ask you to see if you're eligible for any type of program. And so I will talk with them and I'll say, I'm going to ask you some questions. I mean, you can answer if you, them if you would like to, but, some of them are personal because I'm going to ask them, do you get transitional assistance? Do you have a DTA worker? So I can see whether or not they will qualify for, to be able to get a DTA voucher. I asked them, are you currently involved with the Department of Children and Families? Do you have a worker? Because if you do, then you might want to talk to your worker to see if they'll give you, child care subsidy. Then I asked them about, if they're looking just for income eligible. So I said, do you have a few minutes? Can you go over with me what your income is? So, and I give me just a rough estimate of your income, what you get, what you're doing. Are you working? Are you going to school? So ask them all those questions to see how you want to direct them. Do they not need to go on the wait list because they're involved with DCF and they can get a referral from DCF? Do they get transitional assistance and that way the DTA worker can just authorize that for them? Or do they need to be put on call 211 or be put on the 211 wait list because they want to go into an income eligible spot?
Yeah. What else, Margaret? Thank you, Deb. Margaret, I saw your hand up. What else? Does someone do it differently? How do you know who is the family?
Our families just seem to wander in to see the program. They see what's going on and they start asking questions. Many of them qualify, some don't.
Yeah.
And we have them start the process and give them all the information they need to get going on it. But most of our people find us. They
find you. Yeah. They find you. And I think that's what's unique about who we are. And I'm gonna say, I talk a lot about we because we're all partners, right? Depending on whether a family is coming through a contracted provider, right? That's actually the program. So they're walking into the program and you're able to get to know who the family is very differently. When I think about who the family is, I'm like, tell me about yourself. I'm not even thinking about the questions that come along with childcare financial assistance because that's later, right? We talked about in the principles of engagement is that you have to build trust and relationships with people and meet them where they're at. You do that by just informally saying, tell me a little bit about yourself and your family. You will learn so much about who a family is in that moment, and you'll be surprised by how much you'll learn about what they actually need, right? You'll be so surprised by what you learn about what they need outside of what we want to do, right? We immediately want to go into what our process tells us, right? And what we're asking you is to take a moment too and say, just tell me who you are, right? Who you are. And then our job is to help determine like what their needs are. And I shared this before, maybe some of you have heard it, but I started in my intro and I said, I'm a mom, right? So my children are 22 and 12. My introduction into childcare was not formal. Both of my children did not receive any formal childcare until they were much old. Like my daughter was 1.5. And my son was almost 3, right? My son was almost 3. And I never interacted with the child care financial assistance system. It doesn't mean that I didn't qualify. What it meant was that the system was complicated, and no one really ever asked me what I needed, and I probably would have accessed it had I had a better understanding. But you have to understand that families have different needs. And the other side of it is like culturally for my family, we didn't send our children into a childcare system, right? Into a program when they couldn't tell us what was happening. It just wasn't a thing. And so understanding who your family is will help you better assess what their needs are, right? And how you're going to be able to navigate them through the system, right? So I'm going to start sharing my screen again. So we start with, and I had a slides. So we start with understanding who our family is, right? Who are they? We move to what do they need? And I love, many of you said, hey, I'm gonna ask, Deb said, I'm gonna ask questions. Have you ever been involved with the Department of Transitional Assistance? Because you're immediately thinking, how can I help this family quickly, right? How can I help them navigate quickly? And the other side is, how can you help? I think it was you, Margaret. Some families are not gonna be eligible. Can you still help them? Absolutely, right? Absolutely. For many of you, you're family access administrators, right? You're not just that, you're in the community. These are families in your community, and you know your community and what resources are in the community. So you're going to share with them what you know. We consider the second part of the family journey is really offering support and information, or simply said, educating a family, right? When you're educated, you're educated, you can educate your families so they know what's in the community and how to access it, right? And that's by saying, like, telling them what you know. The way I think about this is that if you were talking to a friend, what level of information would you tell your family or your friends? Right? What level would you tell them? Would you tell them all, or would you tell them a little bit or what they needed to know? Anyone, if it's your family and your friends, what are you telling them?
Everything.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so it's very important that what you're saying, to help people with resources, and the more you know is the better. So
Absolutely.
even if the family doesn't qualify, like you said, you can always help. Like sometimes I refer my parents, oh, hey, look, there's this program that they don't need anything, like income eligible or anything. It's just for the community. So I give them resources. And I think that's very important for them, even if they're needing a job and I know, hey, they hiring somewhere, you can go and apply. So stuff like that, you always have to have that, like, know your city and the resources we have so we can refer parents to those resources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly it. Carmen, I see your hand up.
Good morning. I think is very important to help the family to feel comfortable in asking questions that they may not feel comfortable asking, because a lot of cultures are not cultures where you ask for help outside of your family unit or your friend unit.
Can you say that again? There are many cultures.
There are many cultures that people do not ask for help outside their family circle or their friends. So especially coming from a different country or even a different state, people don't know how to navigate. And I know that it's very important to make people feel like they're being heard and like they're truly being helped. But if you don't know the answer to something, to be able to guide them to who can help them maybe a little bit more than you can. You're not going to have all the answers, but if you know someone who may be able to further help them, whether it's for a subsidy or a voucher, and they may need assistance with finding food or clothes. Well, we don't necessarily have those answers, but I know who can help you. I feel like a lot of times that is comforting to know, okay. And I also think it's very important that the agencies talk to each other so that families don't have to look for a needle in a haystack by themselves, that we can actually say, okay, well, I can't give you information, but this other agency can, and here's their phone number. Because navigating is really, really difficult and can be very scary.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, there was something that you said, right? Is that even though you may not be able to help with all the things that they need, what you are is a resource, right? You're a resource and you're just connecting them to what you do know. And that's what we're doing. We're going to educate them and connect them to what we do know, right? But that's all a part of understanding who they are. I saw another hand. Are you still there?
Yep. And Tyrese, you have some things in the chat too. Some great comments about like destigmatizing DCF, those kind of things where families are different and folks may come to you from different systems, and how do you make them feel comfortable when you're talking to them about their needs, and not having them feel bad or stigmatized about how they come in to the system.
Yeah, you don't want people to feel like there's ways to figure out if a family's involved without having to ask those very direct questions, right? Yes. Is it Yannette? I can see your hand now. Did I say your name right?
Yes, you said it perfectly. I just wanted to reiterate that
Yannette, you're on mute. You just muted yourself by accident.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to reiterate that it is so important to build trust in a relationship with our parents. Having a conversation with them. I know a lot of times we encounter a parent who is not giving us a lot, but once you start talking to them, it'll flow and you'll figure out. And sometimes they won't say anything, but they give me an electric bill, for example, and I notice that it has a past due balance. And so I would, talk to them about assistance for fuel and stuff, any resources that I'm aware of. Fortunately, the company I work for manages different resources in our community, and so I am familiar with them. So if I see anything, sometimes they don't say anything, but a piece of paperwork or anything they talk to you about can lead you to finding some way to help out.
Yeah, I like what you said. They're gonna be families who aren't gonna say a lot, but there are things that you see, right? You see in that, from what you see, you're able to engage with them differently. And so those are all the things, and I'm gonna read a couple of things from the chat. Those are all the things that involve getting to know who the family is and educating them. Gail says, oh, I lost it. Oh, we always try to relate to parents. We are no better, etc. Right? We are no better, etc. Parents feel so much more comfortable knowing, and you guys are now, Gail, I lost you because it's so many folks moving in the chat. There it goes. Parents feel so much more comfortable knowing either we have been on the journey or we are parents. Somehow we try to relate to them so they do not feel embarrassed, right? They do not feel embarrassed. I'm gonna take a second and just talk about something someone brought up around culture, right? And that for some cultures, they will not, if they're coming to you asking for help, it's because it is really a last resort, because they will not, right? Most of them will not, and some are in a country that they're unfamiliar with, right? In communities, especially in our homeless, where the situation we're in now with many of our homeless migrant population is so high here now in Massachusetts, right? We have so many families that are new to Massachusetts, new to even this idea of access to childcare, right? To a childcare center. And they're in communities that do not look like them, right? And they're coming from countries where primarily the majority was the minority here, right? The majority was the minority. So taking the time to be able to build the trust and meeting the family where they're at really goes a long way while you're informing and educating them of what's available. All right. Did anyone else have anything else before I move on? All right. So offering the support and information includes like, what are the types of childcare, right? We know that, does anyone want to take a stab and tell me all the types of childcare? What are the different types of childcare that you share with your families? Outside of saying there's voucher, like we have vouchers, we have types of assistance, which are vouchers and contracts, and then we have types of childcare, which is, center-based, family childcare. What else? What else? I talked about in my journey, I did not immediately access formal childcare. What do folks think I did? How did I care? How did I care for my children while me and my husband went to work? What did we do?
They stayed with a family member.
Yeah, they stayed with the family member, right? They stay with the family member. And so for some families, that is what is normal for them, right? I had no idea that there was a thing called informal childcare. No clue. No clue. My son was my daughter was cared for actually by me and my husband, right? We worked different hours. We could have left the workforce, but we decided we just worked different hours until we met someone. We had a very clingy child because she was just with the two of us. And we met someone at the gym who worked in the gym childcare center. And we were like, is this you? There was like a community board with a business card. And I was like, Kamisha Jefferson, is this you? Right? I still remember her name. And our child we didn't need childcare at the time, but what our daughter needed was that social development, right? That social interaction with other children and with other people. And that's what we got through our first contact, right? It was like part-time, 2 days a week. And eventually she just said, she needs to be here. Just bring her every day, right? And we were like, we just needed her to be around other kids. And she was like, no, she needs it. And that's the other side, right? This is early education for our children. And so it's really important for their not just their social development, but their executive functioning, right? Their executive function is like, how do you navigate the world and people? And so that's the other side of it, informing people that it is good for their children. It is good for their children and it's good for them. And then the other things like, how do you support me? How do you support the family in them finding childcare? You know, I think Yannette said you work at community, I see it says community teamwork. So you guys have tons of different resources, right? And so you might not be able to help that family, but you can explain, you can say to them, here's what I can help you with in finding childcare. Another big thing is like making sure that families know what to expect. I can't tell you how many times we receive emails from families saying, I didn't know. Right? I didn't know. We want to make sure that families know what they should expect through the process. You know, as a parent, I want to know what to expect through any process. Most of us do, right? When we're interacting with anything in the system. And then the other things for our families that are on the wait list, what do they do while they're waiting? Right? What do they do while they're waiting? So I'm going to keep us moving.